Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Future Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Muller, and we have a very exciting guest today. Michael will get to introduce you here in a second. For those of you just joining the podcast or watching this later, we're a B2B growth SaaS company, and we specialize in helping companies scale their revenue utilizing AI. So if you want to learn how to take your business to the next level, make sure you stick around, or you're just interested in a growth consult with us, just drop the word growth in the comments or DM us and we'll schedule something for you. But let's jump into today's episode. So let me introduce our guest today, Micheal Shore. Micheal, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. So Micheal, you have exited a couple companies and in the renewable energy space, right? And now you are about to launch your investment company, Juice Capital. So let's first off, let's talk about your background and some of these companies that you've been involved with, and then we'll talk about Juice.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I've been involved in sustainability one way or another for my whole career. And the way that came about was interesting. After college, didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I joined the Peace Corps. And I ended up being sent to Mali in West Africa. I was stationed alongside the Niger River. And very important in this story is that on the other side of the Niger River was another volunteer from North Carolina named Sally Beth. And so that's how she and I met. And we've been married 33 years.
That's
But
fantastic.
the thing about Mali was that it was a land really unable to sustain the people that lived there. There was famine. It was a hard place to live. And because it was this lack of sustainability was so obvious, it brought awareness to me. And so when I came back to the United States, I decided that I wanted to dedicate my career to sustainability issues. And so that led through a whole number of jobs for government, for nonprofits. But eventually in 2007, I saw the opportunity with solar, and it was beginning to emerge in my state of North Carolina. But there were very, very few companies that were doing the work. So a couple of friends and I launched a solar company then.
Wow. All right. And so fast forward, tell what happened with the solar company from there.
So we were early. So
Yeah.
when you're early, you don't have to be necessarily a great company. You don't have to do everything perfectly, but you're ahead of the curve. And so we were, and we were first installing small residential solar projects, then big commercial projects, and then getting financing to install solar farms. And we were one of the very early companies in the United States that were developing these large, many acre solar farms. And it's just a kind of a very difficult process to get a solar farm built because you have to have a contract to sell the electricity with the utility. You have to have investors to sponsor the project. You have to have banks to finance the construction. But we got good at pulling all those things together. And by 2013, we were in the top handful of companies doing this work, installing solar farms all over our region. And then we sold the company in 2014 to a similar company to ours out of California. And so I had the good fortune to successfully exit my first company.
Very nice. All right. And so what happened after that? So now you've exited. Did you take a breather? Did you jump right back in?
Yeah. So it was interesting. I was quite young when I exited. So still in my 40s. And maybe for the first day, I was like, wow, this is cool. I'm not getting up and going to work. And it didn't take long for me to get antsy. And then I started to think about, well, I know this industry of solar energy, as well as anybody. I'm just going to start another company. And so it was interesting after my first company to really have the ideas very early on what this company would do. The second time around, I was blank. I could not come up with good ideas, which I thought was interesting. And so so then I got this philosophy of, well, I just need to get on the playing field. And so and through being on the playing field, maybe ideas will come to me. And so I'd started doing some consulting. And then also importantly, I started a nonprofit called Heart of Waraba. And Waraba means lion in the African language in Mali,
Okay.
where I had lived before. So Heart of the Lion. And it was a nonprofit where we interviewed sustainable entrepreneurs from all over the world to tell their story. And it was great. It was inspiring for me to hear from other entrepreneurs, to kind of get this sense of there's this global movement. We are going to make a cleaner planet and solve climate change through innovation. And innovation, the tip of the spear of innovation is entrepreneurship. But even more important than, or equally important to sharing their stories, was for me to be on the playing field in a community of people who were thinking about things that I was thinking about. And through that, it created a very productive period for me with new ideas. And so I was able to have a little bit of capital for my first exit, all these connections and ideas, and then very much became a serial entrepreneur, where I was involved in starting companies, advising companies, investing in companies. And so it's been like that for me for the last 10 years.
Wow. That's probably been a fun ride, huh?
It's been a great ride. I mean,
Yeah.
so uh, initially I thought about what's inspiring to me, and sustainability was inspiring, which led me to that solar company.
Right.
But in recent years, through this experience, I really think about, well, who is inspiring to me? Who am I passionate about? And I'm passionate about supporting entrepreneurs and being among entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs in the clean energy and sustainability space. So knowing who I care about is helpful for me to decide what types of projects and companies I get involved with.
Well, that's fantastic, and we'll have to. I'll have to send you a couple. We've had 5 or 6 at least in the clean and renewable energy space on the podcast. So definitely people that you're going to have to be connected with.
Good. I'd love to connect with them.
Yeah. So now you've done this the past 10 years. So you obviously are starting a new chapter here, or have another new idea, which is the entrepreneurial spirit, which I love. Right. So talk to us about Juice Capital.
So there has been a great awareness about clean energy and climate change and sustainability over the last 20 years, which has created a lot of headwinds for
Yeah.
this industry. And with the new administration, I would say, cares less about these issues. And so the incentives and regulations and carbon markets that support a lot of the clean tech world
Right.
are going away. So now we're entering this era of political headwinds, and so it's important that the companies that I get involved with stand on their own without the need for regulations, incentives, or the carbon
Right.
market.
Otherwise, you ride the roller coaster. Right.
Otherwise,
Every
you ride the
administration
roller
could
coaster,
change. Yes.
or as we used to say back in the day, the solar coaster.
Yeah. I had somebody on the other day from a solar company, and that's what she said. She goes, the solar coaster. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so electricity tech, so clean tech's a term, sustainability tech is a term, green tech, but
Mhm.
not electricity tech. So Juice Capital, juice is another word for electricity, of course, that we are seeking to invest in companies purely on the basis of their business prospects. And if they cast a green shadow, all the better. But the electricity tech, what's the innovations that are needed for us to meet this incredible growing thirst for electricity that's needed for this electrification of our economy, not just electric cars, but of course
Electric
AI,
everything. Right.
Bitcoin, all of it, that
Right.
we are going to need tremendous amounts of electricity. So the green aspects aside, there's business opportunity for me to be involved in meeting that demand.
I love that you're saying this, because one of the things that I've seen is exactly what, and I don't think people connect the dots all the time until they, hear someone like you say this, but when you're talking about crypto, when you're talking about AI, right? When you're talking about, any of the electric things, including electric cars, they all require power, and electricity is going to be one of the, probably the highest percentage, right? We're going to supplement with all the other things, but certainly that, and we need to solve that through innovation. And so the fact that you're looking at that, my hat's off, because I see the data center footprints growing to get ahead of the AI, and then we get into quant, right? And it's even more computing power. And so all of it requires it. So the fact that you're taking that head on the electricity side is phenomenal. So talk to us a little bit about like the types of things that you're seeing from an innovation standpoint. Are there new technologies, emerging things that you're starting to talk to entrepreneurs about?
Yeah. So first on the AI piece, that it is so fundamental. I mean, that AI creates so many benefits for humanity, and we do need to, and behind AI functioning well, that there's meeting that electricity supply, and so there's projections up till now have that we're going to be growing the amount of electricity we're consuming over the next 15 years by 50%. I mean, just huge
Huge
increases
bump.
in electricity usage.
And we have power
So,
grids right now that can't handle that, right?
right. Yes. And the projections have been, it's hard to build new nuclear plants. I mean, really difficult. They're very expensive. They're risky. They're hard to finance.
Right.
And new coal, there's pollution issues associated with that. And a lot of the projections have been, we are going to meet new energy demand through wind and solar. And wind and solar are both highly cost effective. Natural gas is also highly cost effective, but it's going to be difficult to meet all of this new demand through wind and solar, especially given the political headwinds that the clean industry has right now. So there's all kinds of innovations in how not only we generate but transmit and use electricity, and especially efficiency, that how a building uses electricity more efficiently. How can we have motors that use energy more efficiently in our vehicles? So there's not these silver bullets, but there's just myriads of cool, brilliant innovations that are allowing us to use electricity and transmit electricity more efficiently.
Yeah, no, Michael, this is really exciting actually, because if you step back and think about it, everything you're saying makes perfect sense. I just think a lot of people overlook the fact that we need to do this and invest in these things to get ahead of where everything is going. Because it's easy to see where it's going, right? It's easy to see, oh, by the way, that's going to take a lot of electricity, right? But how we get there is hugely important. So what else are you seeing?
Well, certainly part of efficiency is, how we are using software technology. So one of the companies that I have been involved with is called Ecobot, and
Mhm.
Ecobot helps when you're building a new road. Let's say you have to understand where the wetlands are so you can conserve wetlands. And so for decades, scientists have been going out in the field to take analysis by
Soil and that kind of
soil samples and do their analysis by in person. And now Ecobot augments that work with technology, so software technology, and it's very clever and brilliant, and allows time to be used much more efficiently in the process of wetland delineation. So that's just one example that comes to mind of a company that's doing something that we've been doing for a long time, but using technology to enable that work to be carried on more efficiently.
makes a lot of sense. And to me, it's what you said. There's not some silver bullet, right? It's going to be small sets of innovations in different silos that collectively, right, help make that big leap of getting us to where we're going to consume 50% more power in the next 15 years.
Yeah. So, and then another company that I was involved with launching a couple of years ago is called Next Power 360. And here we have motors and generators, which are surprisingly inefficient. The way a motor or generator works is you create a magnetic field, and a wire crosses through that magnetic field. And as it does so, that induces electricity to flow through the wire. And there are model of how motors and generators work was established by Nikola Tesla 150 years ago. And it
Right.
was brilliant. I mean, for its time, an incredible innovation to take quantum leaps forward in that design. So Next Power 360 creates motors and generators, and the first application is a generator for a wind turbine that is
Okay.
much more efficient than current generators. So, when the wind blows, we're able to pull more energy out of that wind and put it onto the grid.
Wow. That's amazing. And again, another innovation, right?
And
And
right,
efficiency innovation.
right. And then even though the company's main innovation is physical technology, how the generator is designed, the
Right.
whole there's oodles of data on all this wind generation that's being produced and
Right.
how to push all of that electricity onto the grid efficiently. And so there's AI and big data involved to make that part of wind generation more profitable and more efficient.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. And is this all like, so when you think about your vision for Juice, is it to really stay on the electricity side, or will you still dabble in some of the other, sustainable renewable like solar and wind and hydro?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I have a personal interest in sustainability issues, and just as
Right.
another side, another company that I'm involved with is Hickory Nut Gap Farm, and it produces grass-fed meats, and so there's not electricity involved, but it's a a healthier, organic, more
Yeah.
sustainable way to produce.
And just as an aside, because like now you're just near and dear to my heart on the organic meats, is that a nationwide thing or is that local to where you're at?
They are headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina, where I
That's
live.
only 2 hours from me.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And where are
Yeah.
you calling? Where are you talking from?
Just north of Charlotte. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we're
Yeah.
we're neighbors. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
We're neighbors, I think.
And so they started Asheville, and they have grown through the southeast and now through the eastern half of the United States, and they have
That's
plans to
fantastic.
continue growing. And there's a continued increased demand for healthy food products, healthy meat. We're not moving away from meat, but people do want healthier. That's an example of a cool sustainability company that's not involved in the electricity sector.
Right. Right.
And the electricity issue is so acute for reasons that we were talking about earlier that my intention, and with my partners, our intention is to stick with innovations and business models that are involved with the generation, transmission, and use of electricity.
What do you see besides the stuff that we've talked about? Are there other areas that you see? Because again, we're talking about sustainable and renewable, but the energy and sector in general is very very hot topic. Emerging tech. It needs to be infused in all of it, right? Just even some of the examples that you mentioned, especially when you can get data and have AI crunch those numbers faster to give us faster ideas for innovation. Are you seeing the same kind of thought process in the traditional, more legacy type stuff in ONG and in coal? Or are there other natural gas? Are there other areas where, or are you not involved in that as much?
Oh, no, no. So no matter where you generate the electricity, and we can go back to generation in a moment, it all has to
Yeah,
be stored, transmitted, used. So the to take we were talking about use earlier and efficiency,
right.
but now to just look at transmission. I mean, it's there's all kinds of technologies that are helping us make the electricity grid smarter, so electricity can move through the uh, through the transmission lines more efficiently. So the answer's uh, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, um,
Yeah, no, no. I honestly, to me, that's exactly what I thought you would say, Michael. Because, or well, at least I was hoping, right, that you would say because I feel like there's so many inefficiencies in so many areas, and just again, we're just sticking with the energy sector, but there's so many inefficiencies there, and there's so many places for emerging technology, AI, data automations to improve, all right, and make more efficient what we're doing. And so the fact that you're on the front lines of this is really, really cool. Any other stories that you can share that come top of mind about some of the impacts that these companies that you're either investing in or you exited from?
yeah, so another company that I was involved that exited is called the Climate Service. And so here we have this challenge of climate change, which is broadly understood that it's happening and has a huge impact on business and commerce. I mean, not just the impact of storms and flooding in low-lying areas. There's supply chains and how heat waves might affect workers and their ability to do their job. So it's a very pervasive issue that has huge impacts to businesses. And business needs tools to understand what these impacts are so they can plan for them. And so the Climate Service created a software as a service to help corporations put a cost on the risks associated with climate change to their companies. And so, whether it was an airlines or a manufacturer, what are the impacts? What might be the costs? And how do we prepare ourselves for these costs and mitigate those risks?
Right.
And it was such an intriguing innovation. And the company a few years ago sold itself to S&P. So now S&P has integrated the tools from the Climate Service, from that software as a service technology company, into information that they provide to their clients.
Wow.
Just another kind of fascinating story of how the sustainability sector needs innovation to meet the needs of society and business.
Yeah, and it's probably the front line, right? It's all the way downstream, but it's the first step, right? Going all the way up through supply chain into the end customer. And we've had a number of people in the podcast talking about that impact where like we had someone that has an organic foods company, and they were talking about the cacao beans, right? And how much they've gone like almost up through almost 300% because of the climate impact to where they're farmed. And that's what people don't understand. All those dominoes you just said, that's what I'm guessing Climate Service is assessing the risk at each
Right.
step along. Yeah.
Exactly.
Amazing. That to me, more businesses need to do that in sectors where the weather impacts everything about their product line.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's interesting to I'm sure there'll be studies on this of companies that are assessing those risks and incorporating the risks of climate change into their business strategies. Are those going to be better bets going forward than companies that are not looking at that issue proactively?
They have to be, right? They can control their margins because they're controlling their risk at a much better rate than their competitors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to me, it's a no brainer, right? Yeah. So Micheal.
Yeah. I mean, just as as just a quick example. I mean, if your supply chain has a manufacturer in, I don't know, in Taiwan that's very close to floodplains, and there's hurricanes in that part of the world,
or tsunami, or right.
Yeah, whatever, which is not unlikely, and flooding. How are you going to be prepared for that?
Yeah. Yeah. And the example I was using, right? They had farmers in South America, and then they had to diversify because of some of the droughts. And we've had people that have wineries, right? The same thing, where the droughts that are unexpected, and then the rains coming when they are not expected, but like hurricane type winds and rains could wipe out whole crops, right? Which changes the vintages, right? So every industry, and those are just two examples, and we're probably glossing over way bigger examples.
Right. Well, yeah, and there's nothing inherently better or worse with a warmer or cooler climate, but it's this rate of change and the disruptions that causes. That's the challenge. And so, of course, we want to slow that down, and we don't want, we want to minimize the impacts that people feel. But certainly there's also opportunity for business to step in and help solve this new generation of problems because of changes in the climate.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So I told you I was going to ask you a couple questions at the end. Tell me something that you use AI with in your day-to-day that just makes you more efficient.
Well, so for me, I rely on all the modern technology. So AI is infused on the things that I do, even creating a logo for this new company, Juice Capital, where, it used to be a process.
Big process
To do it, to hire, to find the right firm. And here, I don't know, I spent like $35 for subscription to an AI system. And within minutes, I had amazing logos to choose from. So that's just, one specific example. At a bigger way.
But that process used to take weeks.
Weeks.
Right? Weeks.
Or Right. I mean, the sales software, where in my first company, it was this monstrosity that we had to, load, and it was expensive. And now for almost free, we can have services that are online, that are subscription services that are much, much better than what we had only 15 years ago. And then more profoundly, AI, just like every other sector, is revolutionizing the electricity sector, transmission, generation, and use. So Juice Capital, we're going to be looking for technologies that leverage all of the learning, all of the AI.
And
Yeah,
that's an
so
interesting point.
it's going to be making a big difference for us.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up. And so for everybody watching, Michael's starting or launching an investment company. And you just said, right, that one of the things you'll be looking for is innovative technologies as kind of one of your investment criteria, right? That wasn't always the case. It was more about the idea. And the reason I'm hitting on this is, and part of the podcast is about emerging technologies, especially AI. The reason I'm saying that is that every sector is looking for those innovations now. And so for the founders and CEOs that are watching this, that are kind of more hesitant and they've only kind of used AI sporadically, I think that this is a good like wake up call a little bit. Like you're on the investment side now, right? You came from the founder CEO side, right, Michael? And now you're on the investor side and you're looking for those innovations, right? So if you're looking for them, so are all other private equity and venture capital. And we've just had a number of folks on listening, or guests on the podcast that are looking at AI kind of like they looked at the cloud, right? And I'm like, it's not that, right? The AI can be infused in every part of the company, and it's not an IT function. AI is how do you use it for your own whatever function you are in the company, but more importantly, how do we use AI to completely innovate where we didn't think it was possible?
So I'll give you another example. So we're both in North Carolina, and there's a great energy company in North Carolina that I've been exposed to called Nimble Energy. They're out of the Triangle, and Nimble Energy is raising capital. And so I heard their pitch, and if possible, I might invest in them. And they help buildings use electricity and use energy more efficiently. And so up till now, a building manager needed to have the wherewithal to either do it himself or herself, or hire somebody to come in and to evaluate how the building is using energy, looking at all of the data from sensors about how energy is used, looking at the bills about how much energy is being consumed, and then having, through their, say, the consultant's experience, giving sets of recommendations to the building manager on how to use electricity
Right?
more efficiently and save the company money. And so Nimble Energy has created software as a service that does all of that. So for a pretty reasonable cost, a building manager could employ the software as a service, and that software, that AI, brings kind of into the capacity of the building manager all this work that he previously had to outsource to a consultant.
Yeah.
So it seems like a great idea. It seems that Nimble Energy is executing it very well, that they have clients, they're off and running, and it's just kind of another kind of little example of how AI is going to make the business of electricity generation, transmission, and use more efficient.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. Honestly, there's just so many great examples. So many great examples. Last question I wanted to ask you is about growth, right? Everybody that's either been a guest or is listening to this is very focused on how they can grow their business in the right way. And you've done this multiple times through exits. And so obviously you're evaluating companies for their growth. Any advice that you would say based on your experience on how to handle the growth and some of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so I'm taking the perspective of early stage companies, because my involvement has always been at the early stage. And so for early stage companies, it's critical to create partners that can propel you forward. And sometimes that's nerve wracking because you have to lose control to some extent, or not have all of the decision making ability that maybe you did when you were just kind of running it all by yourself. But to to manage growth and set yourself up to grow effectively, it's critical to find the leaders in your sector and to see what kind of creative partnerships you can create so you can move from a successful small company to something larger.
Yeah. No, Michael, thank you so much. That's really good advice. And really excited to see how your portfolio grows from here. Once you get Juice up and going, I mean, looks, you already got your hands in some stuff already, so it's fantastic.
Right.
And we'll probably have to check back with you in 6 or 9 months and see how things are going for sure.
Yeah. So for Juice, it's an opportunity worth the squeeze. And yeah, please, let's stay in touch.
I love that.
Send me those links from the other clean energy or sustainability companies that you've interviewed. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for spending the time with us. And for sure that, we'll definitely be checking in with you. But hey, that wraps up this episode of the Future Proof podcast. Thank you to Michael Short for being our distinguished guest today. And we will see you guys on the next episode of Future Proofed, where you can change the plan, but never the goal. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Brent. Take care.
There we go.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.